At Bursa, Malaysia, we give you access to all kinds of doors, so you can profit from all kinds of opportunities. You'll find doors that lead to businesses as old as the land itself, doors that open to the future and the wealth of opportunities that await. Some doors open multiple pathways for you and for everyone else. And they are supported by the doors that unlock the energy that powers everyday life. There are doors to solutions that are good for people and the planet. And doors that hold new ideas, new ways of connecting data that can change everything we think we know. There are even doors that empower everyone through values that are fair, just, and transparent. While others bring the world to us to shape our brightest minds, you can open doors that take you across the world with just a click, or give you access to the economic roots of the ASEAN. We connect businesses and investors of all sizes. At Bursa, Malaysia, businesses raise funds and gain visibility, while investors seize opportunities to grow their wealth. Trust and rely on us. Open the doors, step in, and create the impact you seek. Bursa, Malaysia, creating opportunities, growing value.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day to our viewers. Welcome to our first Shariah Investing Dialogue Series or SID for 2021. This event is organized by Bursa Malaysia I, Association of Shariah Advisors in Islamic Finance Malaysia, ASAS, and International Shariah Research Academy for Islamic Finance, ISRA, together with our SID 2021 partners, BIMB Investment, ISRA Consulting, Saturna, and Zico Shari'ah. This event platform is brought to you by Islamic Market. My name is Nadira, and those who are familiar with the series, I welcome you again, and for those who just joined us, nice to meet you. Before we start, there are a few pointers I would like to share with everyone. Number one is asking questions. On your right, you'll see a text box where you can submit your questions for the speakers anytime during our live. Number two, taking notes. You can take notes during our live sessions by looking at your right screen. Click the tab next to asking questions. Number three is survey. Help us to fill in the survey below and share with us your feedback on this event. For your information, this is the second year that we're organizing the Shariah Investing Dialogue Series, where we had previously organized the series in October and November 2020. In the Shariah Investing Dialogue Series 2020, we discussed on investment in the future, Shariah fraternity's role in Islamic capital market in Series 1, and setting the pace of innovative thinking in Series 2. You can rewatch the SID 2020 series on Islamic Market's live platform. Today, we'll move over to a new topic of discussion, themed Sustainable and Responsible Investing within the Notion of Maqasid al-Shariah. Alhamdulillah, we are blessed with some of the best industry leaders with us, so make sure you seize this opportunity to explore all the important questions that only they can help you with. Let us start with our first session, Understanding Maqasid al-Shariah from SRI perspective. This session will focus on understanding the similarities between SRI and Maqasid al-Shariah and meeting the growing demand of Shariah-compliant investment products beyond alternatives to SRI investment products. Our speaker for this session will be none other than Professor Dr. Ashraf Mat Hashim, the Chairman of Shariah Committee, Bursa, Malaysia. Professor Dr. Ashraf bin Mat Hashim is the Chief Executive Officer of ISRA Consulting. He is also a Senior Researcher at ISRA and a Professor at International Center of Education Islamic Finance, INSIF. Dr. Ashraf currently sits on the Central Bank of Malaysia's Shariah Advisory Council as Deputy Chairman and member of the Securities Commission of Malaysia's Shariah Advisory Council. He is also a member of Shariah Committee for International Islamic Liquidity Management Cooperation, IILM, and the Chairman of Shariah Committee of Bursa, Malaysia. Let us begin session 1 with Professor Ashraf.
Thank you, Nadira. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah lana sudurana wa yassir lana umurana wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisanina yafqahu qawlana. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antas samiul alim wa tub 'alaina innaka antat tawwabur rahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First and foremost, I would like to thank Bursa Malaysia for organizing this interesting dialogue session. And inshallah today we are going to talk about a topic. For me, it is a very important topic, understanding Maqasid al-Shariah from SRI perspective, because this topic relates very much to our well-being, to the objective of our existence, and what roles that we can play to make our life better, for us and for everybody. But I will try my best not to go too much into technical, but rather to discuss about its general understanding. So the topic is equally important for Muslim and also for non-Muslims. Because we are living in this world together. We want a better place to live, and we want a better outcome, not for us, but also for our generation in the future. My dear brothers and sisters, my dear respected audience, inshallah, we are going to open also question and answer session at the end of this session. So if you have anything to share, please write down your comment so that we can take that up and maybe to respond to that. Today, inshallah, what I would like to share with you, this is my plan for my presentation. Number one, we do some reality check, where we are now. Then after that, we talk about Maqasid al-Shari'ah, what it means. And then we relate that to sustainable Shariah investing. And then more specifically, the Bursa Malaysia's commitments towards sustainable future, what we are doing, what we are going to do. And then I would like to recap some industry leaders' view about this topic. And inshallah, last but not least, what next? What would be our role in relation to the topic under discussion? My dear brothers and sisters, let us look at the reality check. I'm not going to take a long time on this because I believe each and every one of you are aware, is aware about this. But let us just reflect what is happening around us. This data, I took it from, of course, you can always go to the website stated below, the climatenasa.gov, and you can always look at the live data provided by this website. So number one, the carbon dioxide. It is 400 parts per million as of today. And to make us more understand where we were, then it is there, the statement saying carbon dioxide levels in the air at their highest. So what we are having today is at the highest in 650,000 years. Yeah. And then number two, the global temperature. We are up by 2.1 Fahrenheit, degree Fahrenheit since 1880. Yeah, so 19 of the warmest year have occurred since 2000. And then the Arctic ice minimum down by 13.1% per decade. Yeah, so in 2012, Arctic summer sea ice shrank to the lowest extent on record. And then the ice sheets down by 428 billion metric tons per year. So satellite data show the Earth's polar ice sheets are losing mass. And then the sea level up to 3.3 milliliters per year. Global average sea level has risen nearly 7 inch or 178 millimeter over the past 100 years. At the end of the day, maybe there are some countries will be below the sea if we are doing nothing about this. So this is the Earth that we are living. The Earth is, the Earth is a human being, the Earth is now sick. So it really needs our attention. Yeah, it really needs our attention to make it better. Yeah, so I think I do not need to go into all this one by one, what the impact it will bring to us if it continues to go worse and worse. As far as human being is concerned, I think this also you can always Google, you can always look at the different views on the world's 10 most serious problem around us. So this is just a snapshot. Yeah, number one, the climate change, as I mentioned in my previous slide, the destruction of nature, the large scale of conflict or war, the inequality, income discrimination, the poverty, the religious conflict, accountability, transparency, corruption, food and water security, a lack of education, safety and security, and also lack of economic opportunity and employment. You might ask me, these are all very big issues. What can I do? Yeah, we are not a government. We are just for retail investors. We are just one person. or even for institutional investors, when they look at their asset under management, they might only represent 0.000 whatever, how many zeros, 0.1, for example, compared to the global asset under management for the whole world. We are small. What we can do? Of course, if you ask that question, as individual, we cannot do much. But as individual, and everybody is taking the same understanding and the same action, we can, of course, do much. So when we talk about this, don't look at yourself as small investor, as one person, but look at what you can contribute. And if everybody is having that awareness, then everybody will contribute. Then you can look at the impact will be very, very big. Just to cite an example, for during the pandemic last year, when the shares went down, when we have the lockdown, so on and so forth, but somewhat, the with the moratorium, one of the reason, of course, the retail investors, they came into the market and they make some movement in the market, even though they might come in small amount of investment, but their numbers are big. The numbers of those retail investors, they are big in numbers, so they come, even though they buy small shares, each of them, but they make quite a different in our market environment. Yeah, so when we look at this, yeah, there are big issues around us, environment issues. The earth is sick, as I mentioned earlier, and listed here, there are quite a very, very big issues we cannot solve by ourselves. But if each and everyone, we have a proper awareness, then we do our part. Then everybody is doing their part, inshallah. At least we put our effort at our level to make things better for us and for the generation to come. So when we talk about this, we are talking about what role can we play to make things better. Yeah, so we are coming from this angle, and therefore the point of discussion here concern everybody. Even though you are a small investor, you are a retail investor, you are small, but if you have this awareness and you contribute towards a good effort, then inshallah we will bring an impact to the world at large. So my dear brothers and sisters, respected brothers and sisters, let us look at Maqasid al-Shariah. So this is just a reminder to each and every one of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And we have sent you, O Muhammad, not but as a mercy for the al-alamin. So the key word here is that the mercy that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent is not only to human being but to lil alamin, to the mankind, to the jinns and all that exists. So to the environment, to the earth, to the world, to the universe. So it is mentioned clearly here that the objective of sending the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam not only to bring the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us human being, but to al-alamin, to every creatures, yeah, to the human being, to the earth, to the environment, to the animals, so on and so forth. So this is just a quick reminder that we are obliged to do goods not only towards our fellow human beings but to all other creatures of the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then this is another very strict verse in the Quran. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. Corruption has spread on land and sea as a result of people's hand have done, so that Allah may cause them to taste the consequences of some of their deeds, and perhaps they might return to the right path. So this is a very strong reminder from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. We have inherited the earth in good. I mean, the environment was good, but it became worse and worse. We cannot point the fingers to any others, but because of our own hand. Yeah, so corruption has spread on land and sea as a result of what people's hand have done. Meaning that if you want to reverse this, it is up to us. We need to use our power. We need to use whatever we have to reverse that to a better situation. Because in the first place, whatever happened, the corruption that happened was due to our actions. Yeah, so this is just a quick reflection why it happened and how to cure them. So we cannot just sit down and just wait for the nature to heal, for the earth to heal itself through natural, process. It will not be in that manner, but we need to have our own intervention because in the first place the corruption was due to our hand. Yeah, so each and every one of us, just a quick reminder to myself that we are equally responsible to contribute what we can do, what the action that we can do to make our environment a better environment for us to live, and our neighborhood and our people, human beings, they are in a better condition. Yeah. So these are some other verses of the Quran, and of course this is for your reading pleasure. And do not mischief on the earth after it has been set in order, and eat and drink, but waste not by excess, and do good as Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has been good to you, and do not seek to cause corruption in the earth. Yeah, and then the last verse here, do not be extravagant. Yeah, so all of these reminder from the Almighty that we need in our action to consider the consequences. So we need to make sure that whatever we do it. It is a win-win. We have if you are investing, you get profit, and at the same time you do not do harm to others. Yeah. And of course, equally, the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ also, these are just some highlights. There are number. If we want to list down, it will not be enough time for us to discuss one by one. But this is just some highlights for us to reflect. The earth is green and beautiful, and Allah has appointed you His stewards over it. And even the Prophet ﷺ clearly forbade destruction of trees and crops, even during wartime. This is a very critical time, but without any excuse, without any objective, the Prophet ﷺ forbade the destruction of trees and crops, and so on and so forth. Yeah, if a Muslim plants a tree or sows seed, and then a bird or a person or an animal eats from it, it is regarded as charitable gift. So it is not only for us to eat from the tree that we planted, but anybody who gain benefit from that tree, we will be rewarded by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So that reflect the situation that we are living in. We are not living by our own. We are not living by ourselves only, but we are living and surrounded by other human beings. We are surrounded by the environment. We are surrounded by other creatures of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And as a Khalifa appointed by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, we need to take care about all of those things. Yeah. So not only our fellow human beings. So with that introduction, let us go and discuss a bit more about Maqasid Shariah. Maqasid Shariah, in a literal meaning of Maqasid Shariah, is the objectives of Shariah. So this is what literally Maqasid Shari'ah means, the objective of Shari'ah. So when we talk about Maqasid Shari'ah, we are talking about the underlying purposes upon which the Shari'ah established. So there are a lot when you talk about investment. There are some do's and don'ts in investment. When you talk about whatever aspect of your life, there will be the ruling of Shari'ah. Sometimes you can do this, you cannot do that. You are allowed to do this, you are not allowed to do that. But when you look carefully why these rulings are there, because the underlying purpose upon which the Shari'ah established is to make sure that the objective of Shari'ah are attained. They are achieved. So this is the Maqasid Shari'ah, where it is the underlying purposes upon which the Shari'ah is established. And in broadly, Maqasid Shari'ah means to serve the interest or jalbul masalih of all human beings and to save them from harm, daf'ul mafasid. So when anybody asks you what is the objective of Shari'ah, so you can confidently say that broadly this is the objective of Shari'ah, to serve the interests of all human beings and of course the environment, so on and so forth, and to save them from harm, daf'ul mafasid. So whatever ruling in Shari'ah, to achieve this in a broad manner, to achieve what is good for you and to avoid what is not good for you. Yeah, and sometimes good and the correct and wrong, sometimes we can think about it with ourselves, but sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our creator. He knows the best, what is the best for us. Therefore comes the ruling of Shari'ah. Yeah, my dear brothers and sisters, then how you know the Maqasid Shari'ah, the objective of Shari'ah? So this is through a comprehensive istiqra'. Istiqra' means inductive reading of the text as an approach to identify the Maqasid of Shari'ah. So when you look at all the rulings in Shari'ah, there are some rulings, some acts which are categorized as an obligation or wajib, or some of them are categorized as a prohibition, yeah, or haram, so on and so forth. So when we do the istiqra' comprehensively, when you read all those injunctions in the Quran and the tradition of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you can do your reading, then you know what is the objective of Shari'ah. And this is the objective of Shari'ah broadly, as I mentioned in point number 2. Yeah, so this is done by a collective thematic reading of a variety of textual proclamation in Quran and the authentic Prophet tradition to derive conclusion about the purpose of the Shari'ah. So this is a quote from Ash-Shatibi, well-known scholars who always discuss about Maqasid Shari'ah. A bit technical, but to make your life easier, the scholars, they put some categories of Maqasid. So the most important categories of Maqasid that we want to achieve, they are called 5 necessities, al-daruriyat al-khamsa. So this is a bit theoretical, but let us focus about the 5 necessities, which is more, which is easier for us to understand and to apply in our day-to-day life. Before I go to that, in a modern, in our, modern day, there are a lot of efforts around us. For me, they are very much in line with the Maqasid al-Shari'ah. So one of the efforts is this, the SDGs from the United Nations. If you look at the 17 goals of UN SDG, you can see they are very much aligned with Maqasid al-Shari'ah. and even in the excluded sector, yeah, if you look at the bottom there for the UN SDG, the excluded sector, nuclear power generation, weapons, alcohol, gambling, adult entertainment, and of course they include palm oil, but this is very subjective how you look at it. But nevertheless, the main items, they are very much similar to the negative list in Islamic finance. The arms and weapons, alcohol, gambling, adults, entertainment, tobacco, and tobacco-related activities, so on and so forth. So, and of course, the 17 goals, they are much also aligned with the objective of Sharia or the Maqasid of Sharia that I will further discuss in the next slide. So these are the 5 essentials of Maqasid al-Sharia: to protect life, to protect intellect, to protect lineage, to protect wealth. Yeah, so these are among the main essential of Maqasid al-Sharia. So when the objective of Sharia is to protect life, what it actually want to achieve is the opportunity to make a decent living and to live in harmony with a sense of security for future. Social equality. You remember the big problem, the 10 issues that I raised earlier. So this also to overcome those problems by protecting the life. Yeah. So protection of life, of course, require all this: social equality and mutual cooperation, employment opportunities and income stability, equitable distribution of wealth, right to basic necessities such as food, drink, clothing, and good health. And also the protection of intellect will require free and quality education, particularly at the elementary level, to give the opportunity to everybody, equal education access for all to develop a knowledgeable and well-informed community, so on and so forth. And let us go to the wealth, because to protect wealth, of course, means to access to affordable financial protection and understanding the importance of basic savings, safeguard and preserve wealth for the interest of immediate family or business in the event of crisis and unexpected events, opportunity to invest in ethical and transparent investment to generate long-term sustainable and equality asset, encourage charitable contribution to others in need within the same community. So I think what we want to achieve through the essential Maqasid Sharia and also the issues that can be addressed very much in line with what we are addressing today. Yeah. So the life, the mind, the wealth, the dignity, and the faith. Yeah. If you put this into environment, ESG, yeah, environmental, social, and governance, they are also in line. They are in these 5 essentials. They are in line with the SDG. They are also in line with the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance. Yeah. So whenever you are saying that you are a Shariah-compliant investor, in one way or another, you are subscribing yourself towards ESG investment. You are also subscribing yourself to DSG investment, and vice versa. And therefore, I think as a Muslim, as non-Muslim, we are equally responsible to make sure that whatever we want to invest, they are in line with the objective of Sharia, and as much as possible, they are also in line with the ESG requirement. Yeah. So because we are very, very close to each other. And the SDGs achievement in Malaysia, this is as at 2019 from the Department of Statistics Malaysia, a reality check that for SDG number 3, number 9, number 4, we are quite good. But for the others, yeah, we are not so good. Yeah, the prosperity, the planet, 55.3%, so on and so forth. So we need to this reality check, not to blame anybody, but we need to know where we are, and the purpose is that we need to do whatever we can within our control and ability and capacity to contribute towards a better solution, or toward a better environment, for example. Yeah, so this is just a reality check. We are not so good in some areas, we are good in some areas, but we need to do something. This is just for Malaysia. Of course, you can always look at the reality check for other countries as well. So coming back to the sustainable and Shariah investing. So sustainable investing assets in the 5 major markets stood at 30.7 trillion at the start of 2018. So this is not really related to Shariah investing, but when we talk about sustainable investing, as I mentioned earlier, Shariah is very much, they are very much in line with Shariah. Yeah, so the 30.7 trillion is a number, but the most important is that the increase in 2 years, which is 34%, meaning that the investors around the world, they are more concerned that their investment will go into this, that they take ESG factors as one of their interests in making their investment. Yeah, so this has been increased from 1 year to another year. So if you are a public listed company, for example, and you do nothing about ESG in your company, maybe in the near future, the investors' interest in you will be declined. So you need to do something so that your company will be seen as a company that take care of the environment, of the ESG. There are some rating about that, of course. Then that will attract the those investors to come and invest in you. Yeah, so this is the trend, and numbers, of course, will always speak by itself. So you can see the growth, and you cannot, I mean, be left behind. You need to do something from today. If you are in the driver's seats of any company, to start thinking about how your company react to the environment. What is your company's contribution towards the environment, for example, towards the governance, towards the sustainability. So you need to start asking those questions if you want to be relevant in the near future. Because of the growth of 34% in 2 years, meaning that the growth is quite substantial, and you cannot be left behind in this regards, and not because just you do not want to be left behind, but because this is your responsibility towards our environment, yeah, towards our future generation. Yeah, so this is very, very important. Then you can see the relationship between the Islamic investment in Shariah-compliant companies and also investment in ESG investing. Yeah, so you can see the trend that is going up year by year. I mean, those who are investing in Islamic, I mean, Shariah-compliant companies and also in ESG investing, you can see that the performance of those companies, they are good, yeah, year in and year out. Yeah, so this is very, very interesting to observe. And then, of course, Shariah investing is an investment avenue for all. I keep repeating this from the very beginning. It is not only for Muslim, it is equally important for non-Muslim as well, because we share the same objective. Yeah, Shariah compliant, ESG, SDG, we share the same objective. Sustainable and responsible investment, to promote ethical investing, and of course, you are going to have larger investor base. If you do not take care of your Shariah status, you might lose, the interest of Shariah-compliant investors, and also maybe the ESG investors. Yeah, so it is better to have a larger investor base than some smaller investors base, and therefore your risk will be lower because of the larger pool of investors that you have, and the performance and quality of Shariah instrument also, as showed by the previous slides, they are they improve year by year. Yeah. And then my next topic is on the Bursa Malaysia's commitments towards sustainable future. So this is what we are doing, what we are going to do at Bursa Malaysia. Number one, for 2021 to 2023 strategic roadmaps. So it has been outlined in the strategic roadmaps of 2021 to 2023. Just focus on the item number 3, positioning Bursa Malaysia as the global hub for Islamic capital market. And naturally, we will be the global hub for the ESG and SDG as well. And also embedding sustainability in our organization and marketplace. So our goal here at Bursa Malaysia is to become the preferred marketplace for sustainable and responsible investment by embedding high standards of sustainability practices and disclosure in both our organization and in Bursa Malaysia's public listed company. So this is why we are having this conversation today. Not only we want ourselves at Bursa Malaysia doing this, but equally we are promoting this to be adopted by market players, by the public listed companies in Malaysia or elsewhere. Yeah, so we want to together subscribe to this noble approach and noble effort, inshallah. So this is just to quote what Tan Sri Abdul Wahid, our chairman of Bursa Malaysia, in his special address at the 16th Kuala Lumpur Islamic Finance Forum. This is just very recent. To support the growing demand for sustainability, we will also continue to strengthen and broaden our Shariah-compliant offerings with the aim of increasing investors' participation and allow them to fulfill their social responsibility of contributing wealth towards economic growth and society's welfare. This includes using Islamic social funding instruments such as Qard Hasan, Social Wukuk, Sukuk, Wakaf and Zakat as a sustainable means for equitable distribution of wealth to help companies and individuals economically affected by the pandemic. This is in relation with the situation that we are living in. But seriously, I think if you look at Bursa around the world, I'm not sure about others, but I think this is one of many Bursas around the world that talks about social sukuk, that talks about wakaf, that talks about zakat. Yeah, so but it is quite challenging. We are looking into our contribution in this for the better outcomes to everybody, inshallah. And this is the pledge by Bursa Malaysia to contribute 1% of its profit after tax for last year, 3.8 million, towards community project that will positively change and benefit society. And for the first time ever, yeah, zakat was paid. The amount was 667,000. Zakat payment has been paid on behalf of our shareholders. Yeah, so we will continue to do this for our shareholders. Please rest assured that you do not need to pay zakat for your Bursa stock, because Bursa has taken that responsibility to pay zakat on your behalf. So we hope that others also will follow in this good effort, inshallah. So my last section in this remaining time, about 4 or 5 minutes, I just want to highlight what the industry leaders were saying about ESG investment. So this is what the CEO of Bursa Malaysia said. Previously, when we talked of ESG, it sounded like a nebulous idea, but now it's real. Yeah, we see that FTSE for Good Bursa Malaysia Index growing. So this is the index that takes the sustainables into account for the company listed under this FTSE for Good. Yeah, and then this is what EPF Tunku Ali Zakri mentioned, that there was a survey done by the fund in 2018, and he says it found that 78% of its members do look at ESG when they evaluate the investment. This is a trend. Investors are looking at ESG when they want to do the investment, and therefore EPF as an institution that has been given the amanah to administer the fund of their members, they are also because of this survey, they are also looking at the ESG as one of the criteria for them to invest the fund into. Yeah, and then this is what Ismis Matthew, the always CEO of Kananga, say. Just 2 years ago, the topic would probably come up only by the 10th conversation the firm had with its client, but now it is all that people in the investing fraternity talk about. So the talking about ESG, about Shariah compliant, now becoming more and more. And then this is the Gerald Ambrose, CEO of Aberdeen. We can see the demand is there for governance and investing in companies that will make the world better. That is why the IIC, which is the Institutional Investors Council from Malaysia, which was started on governance basis, is starting to look more at the social and climate change side of things. Yeah, so David Harris says same, thing to that effect. Before we go to what next, I hope that I have raised your attention towards the importance of putting your effort towards the ESG, the Shariah compliant, because it is not only you but also the investors. They are looking at it, not because we want to make profit, but also because we want to contribute towards the better environment that we are living in, and also to inherit this to our generation in the future, so that they will inherit something which is good for them. Yeah. So what next? I think there are a lot that we can it can be done. Key to a better world, investors. Yeah, for you, institutional investors, retail investors, please put Shariah compliant ESG as one of your criteria. So if there are companies that bluntly going against the ESG, or so you may choose to invest, you may not choose to invest. Yeah. So so you need to send a signal that you take care of environment and your interest is only in the company that also take care on their ESGs, for example. And then the companies themselves, you are of course the companies would like to make profit, but you make profit without doing harmful things to the human beings, to the environment. So you need to start to do that from today. Yeah, what will be your contribution towards this? And then of course the financial institution, when you want to give financing, for example, you take this as one of the criteria. So maybe you are not going to finance companies that bring harm to the environment, or I'm not sure how you going to do that, or you put some criteria so that if they bring down what they do, the harmful things, you might finance them, so on and so forth. But anyway, how you want to do that, it will be left to you, but you may take this as one of the criteria when you want to provide financing to your client. And then the government may put their incentive towards this. Of course, the government is the key for the government holds the biggest key to move this. So we hope that this also will be one of the agendas of the government of the day. And then, of course, the regulators also will play their parts in doing this to facilitate this, all this, inshallah. So together, of course, there are many other parties, but this is just a list of some important stakeholders that can play their role, including each and every one of you as investors, as companies, to play your role in making our life better, inshallah. And this is just to share with you. This slide has been presented by my dear friend, Mr. Arsalan Ahmad. Now he is the CEO of Al-Rajihi Malaysia. I always like this very practical. This is from banking perspective, of course. The question, if you are the main board, so the question raised to you is that what is the bank's business strategy on sustainability? So my dear CEO, who are attending this dialogue, this question is addressed to you. Do you have answer? It's not bank, but it can be a bank, it can be a public listed company. Do you have any strategy on sustainability at your respected company or your respected institution? So if your answer is yes, alhamdulillah. But if you do not know the answer, maybe this is a time that you need to do something. And also the board risk committee may ask the CRO, Chief Risk Officer, what are our sustainability risks, how we are defining and managing them, how are we measuring the short-term and long-term impact, so on and so forth. So if you look at the question, they are quite practical questions, but they are very, very important questions. So I'm not going to read this question one by one, but you can read by yourself. Then you can ask yourself whether you have the answers for those questions. If you do not, then it is not too late for you to find the answers and to act accordingly, inshallah. Thank you very much for listening. Now I think I'm looking at the question that some of you have sent to me. Thank you very much. So let us, we have just a few minutes left before we take a break. I think there are some questions, there are quite a number of questions, but some question I think maybe I will pass this to the next session where we have prominent speakers to share their view. For example, can we include, this is one of the questions, can we include fulfilling Maqasid Shariah in the Shariah-compliant process to ensure anything Shariah-compliant by default meets Maqasid Shariah? I think this is a very important point. We are working on it. I think just to speak, on what we are doing at the Securities Commission of Malaysia, we are looking at positive screening now. Yeah, not only looking at the negative screening that we have been doing that for a long time, but again, we are trying to look at the positive screening where the Maqasid will come into picture when we evaluate also the companies. So how we are going to do that, it is quite challenging, but hopefully, inshallah, we will come to the stage where this can be shared with the general public and can be implemented accordingly, inshallah. Because Maqasid is something I think from Shariah point of view, because there is a question, what is the role of Shariah scholars in helping asset managers adopting more SRI consideration in their Shariah investing? I think as you are fully aware, the original rules in Muamalat is mubah, or it is permissible. So whenever we want to say that it is now becoming prohibited or impermissible, then we need a justification to say so. So this is the challenge. Shariah scholars, I think we fully, I think I can speak on behalf of myself, we fully support this idea. Only that when you want to change the ruling from permissible to prohibition, you need to have strong justification. Yeah, and therefore working together with everybody, every stakeholders, where they can provide the data, they can provide the information, enough information, so that we can make decision. Of course, for example, for this category of transaction, even though it is permissible as original ruling, but becoming impermissible because of the data that has been presented before us. So at the end of the day, in my view, my dear brothers and sisters, it is not the burden is not only on Shariah people, but the burden is on everybody. So we need a lot of information so that we can move together as a team. Yeah, so I think this is my general response to some question posted earlier. I think there are some other questions. If you allow me, I will take this over to the next session, where we are going to have some panelists discussing about this issue. So back to you, Nadira. Thank you very much for lending your ears. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Ashraf. We will now have a quick break and we will be back again for session 2. Assalamualaikum and welcome back everyone. Thank you for joining the second session of SID 2021 Series 1. Ladies and gentlemen, a friendly reminder for those who just joined us, don't forget to answer the survey after session 2 has ended. Our second session will be a panel session and we will discuss on the Shariah-driven SRI, the needed catalyst for economic growth. This session will focus on the development of holistic Shariah SRI, innovation in Shariah-driven SRI investment products, and understanding the market challenges, the perception and receptivity of investors towards Shariah SRI investment products. We will be joined again by Professor Ashraf as the moderator, alongside three other panelists, Encik Muhammad Razwan Ahmad Tajuddin, Islamic Sustainable Finance Consultant, Zico Shariah, Encik Najmuddin Muhammad Lutfi, CEO of BIMB Investment Management Berhad, and Puan Shaharia Shaharuddin, the President of Saturna Sendirian Berhad. I will first read their brief profile. Encik Muhammad Razwan is currently a panel consultant on Islamic finance for a number of organizations, including the World Bank Group Malaysia, Zico Shariah and Advisory, project consultant for ISRA Consultancy on Wakaf Sukuk Program, and development of sovereign sukuk framework for Afghanistan. He also sits as an investment committee member of BIMB Investment Management Berhad, Bank Islam Malaysia's fund management subsidiary, and a board member of Yapim International. His recent and current works include a member consultant to Astana International Financial Centre, AIFC, for development of a master plan on Islamic finance for the AIFC and Kazakhstan, and a member consultant to the Indonesia government for development of a master plan of Indonesia's Islamic economy, launched in May 2019 by the President of Indonesia. Next is Encik Najmuddin Muhammad Lutfi, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of BIMB Investment Management Berhad since 2015. He repositioned BIMB Investment as the largest Shariah environmental, social and governance ESG asset management house in Malaysia, currently managing more than RM1 billion of ESG assets under management. The firm has also embraced financial technology in its portfolio management in delivering sustainable risk-adjusted investment returns to individual and institutional investors. Encik Najmuddin graduated with an MBA and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the University of Missouri, St. Louis, USA, alumni of the Judge Business School Advanced Leadership Program of the University of Cambridge, UK, registered with the Federation of Investment Managers Malaysia FIMM, and holds the Securities Commission's Capital Market Services Representatives License. Next, we have Puan Shaharia binti Shaharuddin, President of Saturna Sendirian Berhad, who joined Saturna in October 2018. She received her BA degree in Business Studies from Knox College, Illinois, and Master of Arts in Economics from University of Illinois, Springfield. Shaharia has more than 30 years of experience in the areas of fund management, stockbroking, and commercial banking. Prior to joining SSB, she was the Chief Executive Officer of Kenanga Islamic Investors Berhad. She is currently a holder of the Capital Market Services Representatives License for Fund Management. I will now handle the session over to Prof. Ashraf.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks, Nadira. Welcome back, everybody. And now I think I would like to welcome also members of panelists, Encik Radwan, Encik Najmuddin, and Puan Shaharia. They are all, experts in the field. They are on the grounds. So I think maybe the first part more theoretical, but this part, I think we are going more on what is really happening on the ground. So I'm not going to take a lot of time here because I have done my talking earlier. We have only 60 minutes. We have three respected panelists, and I would like to give as much time as possible to them to share their views. So maybe I can start with Encik Radwan. How are you, Encik Radwan? Hopefully you are okay. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Nice to see you and to meet you again. So what is your opinion could SRI be the catalyst to drive the interest and growth into Shariah investing? What else should be done to gain more traction into the Shariah investing space? Yeah, so maybe you can elaborate more on this. Thank you very much, Radwan.
Thank you, Prof. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Thank you, Bursa Malaysia, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this broad topic on Shariah SRI as catalyst for economic growth. I think, as we all know, sustainability is generally defined as meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of our future generation to meet their own needs. So that's generally the definition of sustainability. This context places significant emphasis on the process with due regard to the consequences as well as the impact. Now, my presentations basically takes a slightly different perspective. It's basically on two grounds. One is basically from the perspective of risk, and two is from the perspective of seizing and tapping opportunities from the SRI space. Now, the topic that I've put here is avoiding Islamic markets as safe havens for unsustainable assets, Sharia ESG as catalyst for transition. What it means is basically how do we avoid the current Islamic markets from becoming safe havens for unsustainable assets. And the way out is basically, applying and integrating Sharia ESG, both as catalyst for transition towards becoming more sustainable, and to tap basically the SRI opportunities that's available. Now, as we all know, the sustainable finance market have developed and grown significantly. The global landscape is witnessing a tectonic shift from traditional investments to sustainable investments, transforming global investing in a way we have never seen before, right? For example, the size of the global sustainable investments asset under management now makes up more than 30% of the total professionally managed assets globally, of about $103 trillion in 2018. So that's 30% out of the $100 trillion, more or less, right? And exceptional growth from 2016. This AUM is further expected to grow this year. We are also witnessing increase in the United Nations PRI signatories from mere 63 signatories in the year 2006 to more than 3,000 signatories today. PRI signatories comprise asset owners, asset managers, ancillary service providers, such as independent reviewers of SRI instruments. Now, PRI signatories, they basically pledge to conform with PRI core principles, include annual reporting on sustainability performance. So all these have, to a certain extent, accelerated the growth and transformation of the SRI space globally. Meanwhile, if you look at the bottom right, the AUM size of global Islamic funds, however, is only $100 billion in 2020. So you can imagine the size of Islamic funds is just a fraction, a small fraction of the total professionally managed assets globally of about $108 trillion. And this is reported in the IFSB latest stability report in the year 2020. These brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, provide a glimpse of how sustainability practices receive very little attention, even at the highest body of Islamic finance. Right? So, based on those data, we can safely say that the Islamic capital market is very much lagging behind in sustainable investments and finance from the perspective of ESG. Right? ICM as an asset class will be penalized if it continues to ignore contemporary sustainability considerations and issues. Right? As the ICM trails behind, the sustainability gaps between Islamic finance, Islamic capital markets, and the SRI space grew wider by the day. In all three segments of the Islamic capital market, especially in Islamic equity, sukuk, and Islamic funds, right? The Islamic equity market faced the challenge of the current negative screening taxonomy, stagnating, posing risks to Sharia equity investing. Failure to integrate ESG factors into the existing Sharia taxonomy have now given rise to many Sharia-compliant securities being designated as unsustainable, in quotes, from an ESG standpoint. Similarly, on the sukuk front, the rule on the use of proceeds have not evolved. Right? It continues to ensure that proceeds are merely used for Sharia-compliant purposes, and that is spelled out in the rulebook of the Sharia taxonomy. Right? For instance, global market have nevertheless embraced, for instance, the International Capital Market Association's green bond principles, green bonds, social bonds, and sustainability bond principles, right, whatnot, and have integrated into the regulation of their respective capital markets. These have somewhat driven the tremendous growth to the green social bond market and have given positive impact to the economy as well as to society. Similarly, many other United Nations links bodies like the UN Global Compact, like what Brother Naj has mentioned, the PRI, have basically issued various principles and standards observed by global stakeholders and market participants. Many in the ICM space, however, have yet to do so, right? So unfortunately, I must say that the Islamic fund industry advancement toward this have been rather unimpressive, to say the least, be it globally or in Malaysia, based on the data that even Brother Naj have mentioned earlier. However, there are notable players in the likes of BIMB Invest and Saturna that have been deploying state-of-the-art capability within the Islamic fund management value chain to integrate ESG factors. So the lack of similar response from ICM and as well as generally Islamic finance in this regard is driving the sustainability gap even further. But even so, you know, is Islamic assets really at risk, right? Currently, as we speak. So from a risk and a risk management standpoint, my response to this question is a big definite yes, right? Islamic assets is at risk. Right? The availability of sustainability information has led to technically ESG scoring and ESG rating due to the presence of this third-party service provider that provided ESG scores and ESG rating, as well as the absence of ESG capability. The fact that basically these service providers in the likes of Refinitiv, Sustainalytics, Arabesque, RAM, Fitch Rating, Bloomberg, just to name a few, right? The fact that basically these institutions give the scores are then used by SRI investors, including the big asset managers as well as big asset owners, to make basically sustainable based investment decisions. These ancillary service providers or even asset managers are able to do this to provide the ESG scores because of the infrastructure for sustainability disclosure are being driven by standards by the likes of bodies such as the Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI, was mentioned in the earlier slide, as well as the Task Force on Climate-related Disclosure, or TCFD, which is currently being slowly integrated into the listing requirements of Bursa Malaysia over a period of time. Now we know basically Islamic assets, as I mentioned, it is my view that Islamic assets are at risk. But there is also an obligation on the part of market participants, right? In the likes of regulators, Islamic asset owners, managers, Islamic wealth managers, financial planners, Sharia advisors, capacity building institutions, and Islamic standard setting bodies, right? To perform and to take this as their fiduciary responsibilities in trying to integrate sustainability consideration as well as ESG factors. In regards to, for instance, regulatory supervisory authorities in the likes of the Securities Commission or front-end regulators such as Bursa, right? It is their responsibility, for instance, to basically develop relevant sustainability frameworks. So we have seen in the part of SC, for instance, they have the SRI support framework. The Bursa has basically its own sustainability disclosure framework that they have put in place. Right? The Islamic standard setting bodies like IFFB and IOFI, for instance, I must say, right, if you were to look at the various principles and standards of the IFSB, there is basically no one single sustainability standards that's currently available. So that's at the highest echelon of Islamic finance, right? The IFSB. AOFI, right? Sad to say that basically, you know, there is no hard conversation in regards to matters relating to sustainability, right? And there's no single standards, Shariah standards that has been issued by AOFI to date in respect of sustainability, be it in the form of principles, standards, or best practices. So and these stakeholders should basically take this as a form of fiduciary duty, knowing the risk of ignoring integrating sustainability consideration and ESG factors into their taxonomy from a Shariah standpoint. So as we speak, to give some demonstration effect to what I've mentioned earlier, right? Islamic assets, as we speak today, are already experiencing negative impact by ESG and sustainability consideration. Right? These non-financial risks, which is basically technically, you know, environmental risk, social risk, governance risk, are real, and it's already wreaking financial havoc in the Islamic markets and conventional markets as well, even as we speak. A stock may be designated as Shariah compliant, but may not be entirely sustainable from an ESG standpoint. It is this component that is sorely missing in Islamic market and Islamic finance in general. But interestingly, these stocks are still in our Islamic funds portfolio, right? So there comes the risk of impairment, meaning that, you know, it can potentially be stranded, it can potentially be devalued, right, by virtue of the fact that SRI investors that integrate ESG factors have exited these so-called unsustainable assets, although it is Shariah compliant. There are just too many examples to give. Large Shariah compliant stocks such as Top Glove, IOI, Sam W Plantations, FGV, for instance, of late, are already negatively impacted by selected ESG factors and have given wild swings and volatility in the share prices of each companies as the uncertainty persists. Right? But the more worrying part is the fact that Islamic finance investors are not in an equal footing with SRI investors, which have the advantage. Islamic investors do not possess the same capability as they do with all the tools and SRI rules that basically conventional SRI investors have, or Islamic SRI investors have. Right? But most concerning is the two slides that I have, not necessarily two slides, the two pictures that I have on the right. Right? More concerning, however, as sustainable finance globally are shifting capital towards sustainable assets, on a worst-case scenario, right, Islamic finance may just become heavens for unsustainable assets. Right? Just look at the two pictures that I've posted on the right side or the low side of the slides. Right? These two examples on the right is enough to demonstrate that financiers that have integrated sustainability practices have begun to avoid financing unsustainable assets. Right? Once you have a Stan Chart that exited from financing a coal-powered power plant in Vietnam, a $7 billion power plant in Vietnam. Second, YTL, for instance, the YTL group is now seeking for Islamic funds to finance their so-called coal-powered power plant worth about $2 billion in Indonesia, right? So, as financial institutions globally are shunning away from financing unsustainable assets, right? As you know, coal basically emits a lot of fossil fuel, right, into the environment, and it's polluting, right? So financial institutions are shying away from financing these assets. But projects and assets that are looking for funds, they are looking at Islamic finance as a way to rescue them financially, right? So, and that poses a risk to the Islamic finance industry if we do not basically change and transition in a way that that would basically mitigate those risks. Having said all that, coming back to Malaysia, so are we safe? Is Malaysia safe? To a large or to a moderate extent, Malaysia's ICM is rather progressive. Domestically, Malaysia's ICM SRI agenda have made tremendous progress, notably at the strategy and regulatory levels. The Capital Market Master Plan 2, Islamic Finance and Wealth Management Blueprint, and the more recent SC SRI roadmap are forward-looking strategies designed to mitigate unsustainable finance and seek to tap new opportunities in this space. Regulations such as SRI Sukuk Framework followed those strategies. It's now fully aligned with the ICMAS or the Islamic Capital, the International Capital Market Association's green, social, and sustainability principles, and also the ASEAN Sustainability Bond Standards. Similarly, with SRI fund frameworks and the Wakaf fund framework that has been recently issued by the SC. However, the lack of industry traction at the industry level in terms of product development, in terms of the supply and demand, as well as the supporting market infrastructure are indeed concerning. This means that Islamic assets remain largely exposed to sustainability risk that has not been integrated into the current Shariah Muamalat taxonomy. Right? The government and regulators have never been short on incentive in this space, but the Islamic capital market industry must start to invest in knowledge, people, technology to build SRI capability. That kind of change, in my view, is inevitable and must happen soon. All said, strengthening Malaysia's SRI ecosystem is imperative. The Islamic capital market have little choice but to embrace ESG and other sustainability consideration. It begins with the Shariah taxonomy that we currently have now, the rule book that we currently have now, governing Islamic capital market, Islamic finance. They need to be hard. It begins with the Shariah taxonomy I mentioned. Scholars must work hard to expand the taxonomy. The keyword is to expand the taxonomy. There need to be hard and more frequent conversation over this. As to the approach, they can certainly draw inspiration and guidance from the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, the legal maxim, harm shall neither be inflicted nor reciprocated, the principle of do no harm, as what I think Professor Ashraf have alluded to earlier. This principle, this legal maxim, I think can be pivoted, can be the pivot for us to move and transition towards a more sustainable, a more broader sustainable kind of rules. Others includes, embracing the concept of maslahah, public interest, and the notion of khalifah with a view on custodianship and stewardship. The extraction of these principles are pivotal to Islamic sustainability principles and the value-based intermediation which Bank Negara is advocating. The ICM must rise to this new challenge, and there's no way of us taking a step back. However, at the same time, the opportunities are indeed abundant, and this is throughout the Islamic SRI value chain, both in terms of products, services, and markets. And to your surprise, some may be even game changer or game changing in nature, and will create a meaningful outcome to the Ummah and to this civilization. So I will stop here. I'll be happy to take on any questions, if any, later.
Thank you, Encik Radwan. I think when we talk about SRI and ESG, they are there in Shariah from day one, more than 1,500 years ago. But when it comes to application, as mentioned and raised by Encik Radwan, there is somewhere mismatch between the two. It's quite, the issues raised by Encik Radwan are real and challenging and to some extent provocating our mind to really look into all those issues. Of course, you have came towards the end with some suggestion. I think we really appreciate that. I think everybody need to look on all these issues objectively, so that inshallah we will come with a better solution. Thank you, Encik Rad, Encik Najmuddin. I think you are very much instrumental about this ESG investing through the BIMB investment. Yeah, for example, the Arabesque kind of fund, BIMB Arabesque fund is known. I mean, you are among the pioneer in this regards. So, in your opinion, how do investors receive and perceive the value proposition of Shariah-compliant SRI? Do Shariah-compliant SRI heavily influence the investment decision of investors? So the floor is to you, Encik Najmuddin. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, Professor Ashraf. Thank you for the introduction. Also, thank you, Bursa Malaysia, for inviting me. I think it's a great question. For BIMB investment, it's still a journey. I have some slides that I'd like to share. I mean, just 9 slides, just to give an idea, a bit of a background of our journey, and I think the potential on Shariah and ESG investing, and I think some of the work that we have done, and probably I can then share some of the our experience. Yeah. If you can look at the first slide. The first slide really talk about our journey. So, BIMB investment has been around for almost, 30 years, and we are 100% owned by Bank Islam. Our turning point for sustainable, responsible investing, started in 2015. In 2015, we wanted to turn around our investment strategy. And that is where we met Arabesque Asset Management. Maybe some of you know that the founder and the CEO is Omar Salim, a Muslim. And we spoke to him, and he was developing a technology, artificial intelligence and big data technology, as well as looking into sustainability and ESG. Arabesque is the world's first, quant ESG specialist. So, we realized that it will be a great fit. We have been doing Sharia investing, for quite some time. And at that point of time, I think the SC, the Bank Negara, has already been talking about, sustainability and ESG. And we decided to then, work closely with Arabesque, given the expertise. And the chairman of Arabesque is George Kell. George Kell is the former executive director of the United Nations Global Compact. And I think maybe most of us here not realize that George Kell is the one who actually coined the term ESG. So, having a resource person in an organization, I think is really, really important. And the fact that they're quite advanced on the ESG and sustainability framework, and the fact that they use technology, to process ESG information and ESG data, I think it makes perfect sense, for us to partner with them. So, in 2015 itself, we launched the first global Sharia ESG equity fund. And after 6 years, the fund now is the largest global Sharia equity fund in Malaysia. I think for investment, generally, I think it's important that we deliver that the risk adjusted returns. I think that's very important, and it's a very crowded place in Malaysia. I mean, just looking at Sharia funds, there are almost 300 Sharia funds, and so it's very important that we have a fund, although it's integrating with ESG, that is also at par or better. And on top of that, obviously, we also have to compete with the conventional funds. So since 2015, I mean, we have made a point that we are going to be a Sharia ESG fund house. And since our first launch of our global Sharia ESG, then since then we have launched 5 other funds, and we've launched a Malaysia Sharia ESG equity fund. We've launched an Asia Pacific Sharia ESG equity fund. We also launched the world first global ESG Sukuk fund back in 2018. As you know, 2017 is when the SRI fund framework came out by the SC. And just the last 2 years, alhamdulillah, we've been awarded as the ESG Asset Manager of the Year for 2020 and 2019. So the journey has been, good, but at the same time, it was not easy, because at the end of the day, although that you integrate Sharia in ESG, to investors, retail investors largely, performance is still important. I think the fact that we are able to deliver consistent performance is because of the use of technology. I think the thing that we have through the partnership with Arabes, the fact that there is the usage of machine learning and artificial intelligence in stock selections. Even on the ESG assessment, ESG assessment is also driven by big data technology to ensure objective and quantifiable ESG assessment. Just a quick snapshot of our journey. I think the next slide, I think Prof. Ashraf have shared, I think with the audience, with the first session just now, that SRI is on the rise. I mean, if you look at the growth rate, I mean, it's really outstanding. It's very astounding. And similarly for the next slide. I mean, the next slide is really on the, if we look in Malaysia, how many funds are there in Malaysia now that focus on SRI? If you look at the numbers, there are currently 20 SRI funds, but the AUM is only around 2.5 billion compared with Sharia AUM of 131.7 billion. So there's a long way to go, but we're seeing more acceptance toward SRI investing. If you can move to the next slide. These are probably some of recommendations, to, I guess, to build an SRI asset management industry, and to help to grow the SRI, fund and asset management industry. I think firstly is we need to encourage, companies that have, low ESG ratings, to disclose more information, so that we have a wider, bigger investable ESG universe, so that fund managers can actually look at a bigger universe when it comes to constructing an ESG portfolio. Capacity building, I think perhaps the governments or regulators can look at setting up research centers on ESG and sustainability, probably providing grant, and perhaps to to attract global houses to set up, ESG and sustainability, research center here in Malaysia, similar how we did for Islamic fund management. Talent development, similarly, we should attract more experts, ESG experts, ASRA experts to Malaysia. And I think it's also good if we can get the support from the institutional investors. Yeah, we have many pension funds here. Perhaps a dedicated pool of fund, to encourage the players, the industries, to build capabilities on ESG and SRI. And the part of the whole value chain when it comes to fund and wealth management, banks also play an important role in terms of distributing ESG funds. So probably there should be some encouragement, some incentives for the bank to focus on SRI, ESG, wealth management. And also robo-advisors. I think there's a lot of robo-advisors already in the market, to perhaps to encourage them to also to focus on ESG and SRI investment, maybe some tax relief. And another thing is when it comes to fund and wealth management, I think it's also worth considering to expand the scope of asset classes for fund and wealth management. One of the things that probably could be considered is the green and sustainable financing asset class. And the eighth recommendation is on EPF approved funds. Yeah, currently it requires 3 years track record. I think to speed up, to encourage more ESG funds to be developed and to for fund managers to build capabilities. Perhaps the ESG and SRI EPF approved funds should just look at probably just 1 year track record. And lastly is to encourage more fund managers to become PRI signatory. Maybe there should be some incentives to encourage the fund managers. And the next slide is just some I just wanted to share some experience. This is not promotion, but just to share some of the things that we've done. Firstly, we've launched a robo-intelligent app, and this is a Shariah ESG app that we've launched last year, in April last year. Currently, we already have about 11,000 new investors, 11,000 investors investing through this BEST app. Yeah. BEST actually stands for BIMB Investment Electronic Sharia Investment Tool. And the great thing about this BEST app, it only needs 10 ringgit to invest, and you will have exposure to ESG investing across asset class. We have a global equity inside, we have an Asia Pac equity, and we have a Malaysia equity, we have the Sukuk. It is all Sharia ESG compliant, and investing is only investment starts only 10 ringgit. Yeah, so there's so many benefits. One of the key benefits, I think, is the fact that in less than 10 minutes, in less than 10 minutes, you can really invest it. Yeah, and there's no jargon. Yeah, it focuses on your goals, your life goals. The conversation in this app is really about what do you want to achieve in life. You can customize your goals, yeah, and then based on your risk profile and the fund risk profile, then it will recommend you the fund for you. Yeah. And the last two slides, these are the two new funds that we just launched this year. One, Prof. Ashraf did mention, we've launched our the first Wakaf fund. It's called Makmur My Wakaf Fund. Yeah, this is a global mixed asset Sharia ESG fund. Yeah, and this is the first in the country. And the great thing about this Makmur My Wakaf Fund, 50% of the return will be wakaf. Another great thing about this fund is also the fact that it gives you monthly income distribution. Yeah, 50% of the fund will be investing in Sukuk. Another 50% will be investing in various asset class that includes REITs, includes ETFs, includes equities. So if anything, this fund, gives you that target to give you that, monthly income distribution, and half of it will go to Wakaf. And we work closely with IBIM, the Association of Islamic Bank, and they are the administrator on the Wakaf for this fund, and they work closely with the state religious councils, nationwide. Yeah, and the second fund that we just also launched is another global Shariah ESG equity fund. Yeah, and again, this fund is using artificial intelligence signals, AI signals on the stock selections, and of course the ESG assessment of each stocks are done very dynamically, and the information on the ESG informations are data driven, with more than 200 over metrics. And we get live ESG scores for each of these companies on a daily basis. So you get ESG scores and also the Global Compact scores. The difference between the ESG scores, it looks at the mannerism of the company, how the companies manage its resources, how it manage its supply chain. On the Global Compact score, or United Nations Global Compact score, really looks at the behavior of the company, that looks at things like the environment, social governance, and also anti-corruptions. So coming back to Prof. Ashraf questions, what is the reception? What our experience so far? It's been a journey for us, and the thing is, at this moment, there is no segregation between ESG and non-ESG. If you look at the Lipper table, for example, we are lumped together with the non-ESG. Yeah, so that really confused investors. So they don't know which one ESG, which one is non-ESG. I think it's a good first step if there should be some form differentiation, because at the end of the day, investors look at performance. But I think, like everyone was discussing today, that people are very concerned about their investment, and they want to know whether the investment are ESG compliant. So I think it's very important that we have that visibility to investors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Encik Najibuddin. It is very interesting from application point of view, when you the system itself, when you couple the AI, the big data, and the outcome is the quantifiable assessment. Because when we talk about ESG, as mentioned earlier, it is a bit subjective. So with the help of the technology, you make it, quantitative. So this is very nice. And please also, my dear audience, to look into the 9 recommendations raised by Encik Najibuddin. They are all very important, and also all the best to your Makmur Wakaf Fund. Maybe if we have time, we can talk about that later. Last but not least, we come to Puan Shahariah. Of course, this Shariah SRI investing now becoming the talk of the town. So do you think this will sustain, this team will sustain, or somewhere in the future there will be another team as a talk of the town? This is just my general question to you. So the floor is yours, Puan Shahariah. Thank you very much.
I will quickly answer that question, Chairman. I think we are now living in a world where SRI investing is important. I think if you look at the 3 Ps, if you consider people, planet, and the profit in your investment are important, so SRI is going to stay for long. So I'll start with my presentation. Anyway, thank you to Bursa Malaysia and other organizations that have sponsored this, and for having me in this dialogue today. And today the presentation will be on Shariah SRI, the needed catalyst for economic growth. And Shariah SRI, Islamic finance as model. here we are looking at, we know that Malaysia has actually developed an Islamic finance ecosystem, and we have this long-term track record of Islamic finance in Malaysia, and we have that experience. So with that experience, we should apply lessons learned from 40 years of Islamic finance into the SRI roadmap. And how would Malaysia increase that Shariah SRI in Malaysia? So we do this in a holistic approach. So we look at the three main areas. We are looking at the demand side, we look at the supply side, and we look at the regulator side. So these are pull and push factors that has to work together. And what can we do in these areas? So if you look at the demand side, you are actually, you can incentivize, you can educate a consumer to understand what is Shariah SRI for them to buy Shariah product. And you have to also inform the consumer on having advertisement on social media and advertisement to keep them informed. And on the supply side, that will be driven by the industry. And the industry has to look into more Shariah products development. And we have to build the human resource, human capital, in the sense that we have to train our personnel to understand Shariah ESG deeply. In that sense, this will be a continued education for our personnel. And we have to have the systems and processes in place as well. Example, you must have an SOP for Shariah SI or SOP for a signature digitalization. And then we look into technology and enablement. You have online platform. You can have your investment, your ESG process in your investment process, and that has to be digitalized as well. So if you look at the regulator side, then the regulator has to actually look into the rules and guidelines, standardization of requirements, and we also can tap on the Islamic finance research. And with all that, do you think there'll be challenges? Yeah, of course. There'll be challenges as we move along. And let's look at the challenges that we can see. And these are the challenge. There'll be plenty of challenges. And the three key areas that I'll be looking at here is just to highlight that how you standardize your rules and regulations to incorporate Shariah SI, and what are the costs involved. These are the things that you will be, if you go into Shariah SI, there'll be costs involved. And whether we have audits, we have third-party certification. And let me give you some examples of challenges. I will just look at the legal side first. Let's say if someone invests in green sukuk and later they tell you, hey, this is not a green sukuk. And if they sue you, do we have a legal framework in place? And let's say an investor tells you that, that ESG, ETF ESG is not ESG. Do we have precedent for this? So these are challenges on the legal side that we will face. And the other thing is that look at the demand side. Let's say there is a semiconductor company that uses a lot of water. So there'll be water wastage in this sense, which will impact the environment. And how is this company going to solve this water wastage problem? And this will cost money and will impact their profit, and that will be a challenge to this company to address this issue. And if they don't address this issue, they will not be sustainable. And another challenges going into the demand side will be, how do we educate investors to think like ethical behavior thinking, meaning that less is more. Meaning that if I give you an example, if I have a company A that gives you a $4 profit and a company B that gives you $5 profit, definitely you go for $5 profit. But if I tell you that company B is non-Shariah compliant SRI, if you are sustainable investors, then you will look at the $4 profit. Here we are trying to tell the investors that Sharia investing goes beyond profit. Okay, so then there's other challenges like we asset managers who are Sharia SRI asset managers, we as an Sharia asset managers, we don't invest in fossil fuel, we don't invest in oil palm plantations, and with all the related stocks linked to these sectors, industry, we will have a reduced universe to look at. So, but bear in mind, every challenges, there'll be a solution. So, of course, if you are not looking at the fossil fuel stocks, then we can look at alternative energy in that sense. Now that I have discussed on the demand side and the legal side, I will move on to the supply side to see what kind of Shariah SRI products we can invest in 2021. This is a graph showing where is, if you think that there is, what kind of equity should I own if inflation is rising? Okay, so if you think there is inflation in 2021, and if you look at the chart, it shows that value stocks is the winner. But remember, in 2020, we actually had pandemic where the inflation actually went off. I mean, the inflation came down. So we were investing in growth stocks. So example of growth stocks are technology. And if you think that the inflation is going higher, then you will be looking, then value investing will be attractive, value stocks will be attractive, and that will create more value. And let's look at what other asset class we can invest in 2021. Here, this is a bar chart showing that in 2020, there's a reduction in sukuk issuance in 2020. That is because the economies of these core Islamic financial countries were impacted by the COVID-19. But going forward in 2021, we will be seeing more issuance of sukuk, and we as Sharia SRI investors can have an option to look at sukuk as our product. And we want to know whether our Sharia SRI products are sustainable. We will see if we put them to test on a change in commodity prices. Yeah, this is a graph showing that the volatility of oil prices. And if you can remember, in March 2020, the WTI prices went deep down to negative $40 US. And if you are a conventional funds holder, then you will be freaking out at this moment. And if you are a sustainable fund holder, then it doesn't matter to you whether the oil price go up or go down, because as a sustainable fund portfolio, we don't have fossil fuel in their portfolio. So these are one of the features that we have in a Sharia SRI product. They are resilient. And because of the inbuilt strategy that we have in a Sharia SRI portfolio, they can be capital preservation in there, and they will also improve. They will have improved performance in the long term. Let's look at the performance of the Sharia funds, Sharia SRI funds. Okay, this chart will actually show you. It's actually comparing ESG funds to the market. It's a S&P 500. And it shows you that ESG funds perform better throughout the chart. And next, we look at a pure Sharia SRI fund. Okay, this is comparing a pure Sharia SRI fund, which is our very own Satuna Amanah Growth Fund, versus the market S&P 500. And it shows here that the fund has been performing better than the market, and Satuna Amanah Growth Fund has been in the market for the last 30 years, and they has been Shariah-compliant and also ESG focused, and it has been proven that the Shariah SRIG funds do perform. Okay, we can look at the market outlook now. Where is the market direction? And we know that in 2020, we thought the market was bad, but it ends up well in 2020. In December, towards the end of 2020, US had their election and Biden became the president. So one of the drivers we look in 2021 is Biden reset. And under Biden policy, there'll be higher taxes, will be climate change, which is totally different from what Trump had earlier. And when with climate plan, you have energy saving, and you're talking about roads, infrastructure. So a lot of industries will lead to the climate plan and climate change, which actually good for a sustainable funds. And we are looking at another policy is US-China trade relations. We have to be mindful of this. Earlier, we thought Biden would be a bit cool off on this, but actually it's otherwise now on US-China trade relations. And the other factors that we can look at is fiscal monetary policy as the drivers, and one last drivers is on the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccination. And with those drivers that I've mentioned earlier, we want to look at what other sectors will be impacted by that drivers. And if you look on the left, you see technology, you see healthcare, you see consumer staples. These are sectors that perform in 2020, and in 2021, these sectors may work. There's industrial, materials, and renewable energy. And if you have a sustainable funds, it will be very. It works well with your portfolio. I think we'll move on to my last slide now. And I will conclude this presentation with the 6 principles of UNPRI. This is because we at Satuna as a group is UNPRI signatories, and we have been the signatory since 2013. And I will quickly run through the principles of the 6 principles of PRI. And if you are a signatory, you have to abide with these principles. Principle 1 says that your ESG issues has to be incorporated into your investment process. And principle 2 says that you have to incorporate ESG issues into your SOP and manuals. And principle 3 says that ESG issues, you have to seek appropriate disclosure of ESG issues with the company that you invest. And principle 4, promote acceptance of ESG, which means that's what we're doing now. We are at principle 4, talking about ESG in a seminar, in a conference, on a podcast. And principle 5 said that you work together to enhance effectiveness in implementing this principle. On a higher ground, we will be advising the community, the industry on like the product sharing or ESG sharing knowledge. And principle 6 is the final principle, where a report on activities on progress towards implementing principle. Here at Satuna, we produce a monthly report, a quarterly report, and a periodically report on ESG issues. With that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Puan Shahariah. Very interesting. This is, towards the end, signing this PRI is a kind of self-imposed actually at the moment, because there is no regulation making an obligation. But I think this is very important for all of us. If each and every one of us at the moment self-impose on ourselves all these principles, I think we can make a lot of changes. Through the question, I think there are a lot of questions coming in, and this session, I think, attract your attention already, but unfortunately we do not have much time to go through all the questions. So maybe I'll read 1 or 2 questions. For example, number 1, this is maybe Encik Radwan can take this through. What is the best way of expediting the integration of global ESG standards and principles into Islamic capital market? so you can answer then wrap up at the same time. Thank you very much.
Yes. I think as I mentioned in my presentation, I think the best way to accelerate the integration of ESG is to be aware of the risk of not integrating ESG. So if you basically have a portfolio of Islamic assets, a Sharia-compliant stocks, or called Sharia-compliant sukuk, right? Or a Sharia-compliant Islamic funds, right? Or Islamic funds in the sense, right? And the underlying portfolio of those funds basically are Sharia-compliant but not factored into ESG factors. There is a risk to that Islamic assets, right? So first you must understand basically the risk. Once you understand there is a risk of that asset being impaired or being devalued, or the Islamic asset being illiquid by virtue of the fact that other SRI investors have basically disposed of those assets, what will happen to your asset is those assets being significantly impaired, potentially, or even illiquid, right? So realizing and being aware of that risk is important, of not integrating these ESG factors. Secondly is to build the on a more proactive side is basically to build the so-called ESG ecosystem, right? One is through development of standards and principles. So Islamic body like IFSB have to play a meaningful role to basically starts developing new standards that focuses on sustainability. There is none currently at IFSB, right? Secondly, regulations by regulatory and supervisory authorities of Islamic capital market, right? They can basically be proactive in identifying opportunities and also as well as trying to mitigate risk by basically introducing SRI-related frameworks, ESG-related frameworks for the various capital market products and services. Of course, that is based on demand from the marketplace or whatnot. Thirdly, is basically sustainability disclosure by a fund and regulator, for instance, the stock exchanges. So Bursa Malaysia, for instance, have its own sustainability framework, disclosure framework that basically encourages corporates to disclose their ESG performance, whatnot. So that, in that sense, it will basically accelerate the entire process of integrating ESG integration into all segments of the marketplace and whatnot. And thirdly, infrastructure. You need to have an ingenious way, an innovative way of identifying what is the key infrastructure that can incentivize the acceleration of ESG integration into the various stakeholders, especially corporations and whatnot. So I end my presentation there. There's no turning back. Integrating ESG is inevitable.
Thank you very much, Encik Rad. We are supposed to stop at 5:25, but allow me to continue about 5 minutes more. I'll come back to Encik Najmuddin. A question. Are Shariah funds perceived as SRI funds from the perspective of investors and asset managers in Malaysia and outside of Malaysia? If not, what can be done to change this perception?
Thank you for the questions. And the thing is, we're quite fortunate because our regulators have, provide conducive, regulatory framework for the players. So we have clarity on the SRI regulatory framework. So if you look at the development of SRI, initiatives in our Malaysian capital market, it's all started in 2014 when the issuance of the ASAS SRI Sukuk framework and the launch of the FTSE for Good Bursa Malaysia Index, and then on the 2015 we saw the first social impact sukuk by Khazanah, and then 2016 there was a tax incentives for SRI sukuk, and then for 2017 there's so many SRI initiatives related that was launched by the regulators. I think one of the key one is to this question is the launch or the issuance of the ASIS guidelines on SRI funds. To the questions, meaning that, we already have the guideline, by the regulators. So it is, for the industry, to take these opportunities, to further, promote and further provide that SRI investing solutions to investors. So I think for Malaysia and for the players, both the fund managers and also investors, we already have a SRI framework, for us to actually develop the industry.
Okay, thank you, Cik Najmuddin. I think the last question, maybe Puan Shahriah can attend to this. What are some of the best practices in terms of disclosing the ESG and sustainability risk for Islamic funds and assets? If I'm not mistaken, I mean, this is one of the principles under PRI. As a layman, maybe this disclosure, we need to understand that. Maybe you can share your experience in this issue, the disclosure of this SRI, ESG.
Okay. In terms of disclosure, normally they will have this disclosure under the company's annual report. The company will have a section where they will disclose what they have done, like probably is a, let's say if you're a water company or a semiconductor company, so you would your main concern will be on environmental, and then you will stress on they have done this to reduce water effluent, and they have looked into all the areas that they need to address. And normally as a asset manager, we look into disclosure religiously. As an ESG fund manager, we give them a score on their ESG based on their ESG disclosure. So that's how we do the scoring for the for each factors to the environmental, to the social, and to the governance. So by reading this disclosure, we actually rate this company on their scoring of the on environment, on social, and on governance. And with that, we actually once the analyst and the fund manager actually rate them through this disclosure, we will also use other benchmark to see whether the rating is the same as others, and that's how we do our ESG rating for companies. And so disclosure is important in this in being an ESG compliance company.
But just a quick question, this disclosure, Puan Shahriah, is it a must at the moment, or is this on voluntarily basis?
We as investor will actually insist on this disclosure. We as an asset managers, who are SRI asset managers, can insist on companies to have this disclosure. And if you, like you said earlier, that if they don't give you a disclosure, you cannot rate them. So you don't know, then you will lose out in the Shariah SRI investing.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think I would like to thank all panelists. The session here, I think, attract attention, attract awareness among us. I think a lot of things need to be done, and hopefully when we're doing that, we can see the lights at the end of the tunnel, inshallah. And with that, أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you to our respected panelists, and we hope that you had enjoyed such vibrant discussions that we had for this evening. That marks the end of Sharia Investing Dialogue 2021 Series 1. I would like to share a few reminders before we leave. Number one is upcoming sessions. Below on your right, you will see the past and upcoming sessions. You can set a reminder so as not to miss any of the future sessions. Number two is feedback. Make sure to leave your rating and feedback by filling up the form below under live updates. Number three is watch again. You can watch again this session and all past sessions on www.islamicmarkets.com. Number 4 is survey. Help us out to fill in the survey form and let us know what you like or what you dislike, or maybe what you want to know more from this series, and we will take that into consideration. On behalf of the organizers, Bursa Malaysia, ASAS and ISRA, we would like to thank the SID 2021 partners, BIMB Investment, ISRA Consulting, Saturna, and Zico Shari'ah. We would also like to thank Islamic Markets for hosting the SID 2021 on its live platform. We hope that this session has brought meaningful values to you, and we hope to see you again in our next series. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.